Hey, what up, guys? Today we're going to go over a really awesome plugin called Emergent Drums 2. I've messed around with it a little bit, but I really wanted to dive in deep with it and kind of record that, right? So, this is really next level because of the fact that it's like generative AI. So you could drag samples inside of it, or you can use their engines to create certain sounds and just keep generating new sounds. It's just really cool. So we'll dive into it. It's primarily for drum sounds, but I have found applications where really it's cool when you put like, vocal one shots, synth one shots inside of it just to see what it comes up with. So that's always fun. So let's kind of go into it. So over here we have the drum pad. So this is just, it really represents kind of any of your MPC controllers. What's cool too is you can come to each of these pads individually and you could assign the actual note. So say if you have, your controller assigned to different, notes, for instance, this makes it easy to streamline that process, or, maybe you don't have a keyboard that goes in a certain range. What may it be? Just really cool. So like it maps out to drum controllers. So I have my controller here. I can play all these sounds. They have a kit over here. So you can come over here and create. So, create your own kits in folders, but there are also some that come with the application. So that's always cool. So like I was saying, you have these notes you can start off with and these sounds, right? Here we have this ability. So this is more like the engine that you use to help you generate specific sounds, right? So we have obviously a random, right? Where I'm sure it uses a little bit of everything. But then we have kick, clap, snare, closed hi-hat, open hi-hat, cymbal, percussion. So pretty much, all of your kit sounds for a drum. And then we have these ones, right? These two, I think, are just a little special. The glitch and the noise, sometimes you'll get like more melodic or tonal sounds that you could use to stack in your drum pad and drum beats to really give them some interest. And then we have the imported. So of course, we could drag our own samples inside of here. I think that is where it really makes this plugin the most game changer, because we can drag our own samples, right? So that means recorded samples. If we have, samples that we purchased from a sample library or Splice, right? We could drag stuff inside of here and create new sounds using that. So again, we have these like engine selector up here, right? For each of these pads. And then we have this selector here, which is something that's pretty interesting. So we have a crunchy and creamy. So we can kind of see here. Let's just go to the kick. We'll kind of switch between these. I feel like with the creamy, you get more like very defined sounds, a little bit more clarity on them, a little bit more crisp, I would say. With the crunchy, I feel like there's either more noise added or saturation. There's just a little bit of fizz that's on every kind of sample. That could be a good thing, right? And that could be like a layering technique that you can use to make your drums stand out. So that really does come in handy. So you can kind of morph sounds in brand new ways, right? You can take very clean samples, drop them inside of this, and then use, the crunchy mode to generate samples that are or similar or random, but based off of that initial sample. Cool thing too, so we have this slider. So here we can really dictate how similar the sample is that we're going to be generating. Cool thing about this is as we slide this up and we hit generate, we get new samples, right? But we also can go back, right? So let's say, for instance, maybe we're just, too close, too similar to the sample that we were using before. We can pull it more towards the random slider. Right, and then we can also go back, right? Right, so this is just really awesome because it makes the sound design, like, I like to think of it, there's different types of sound design sessions that you can have, right? I think this falls more in line with like the happy accident kind of sound design, right? Where you can just generate things and get some pretty cool some pretty cool results, right? I think where this plugin also, I think, goes to the next level is the fact that you get control outside of just generating new samples, right? So here on the right side here, so we have obviously a gain knob. You can see that reflected as well here down below in dBs. Then we have attack, release, we have a clipping feature, and then a frequency slider, right? Think of this as like a filter, cutoffs, right? So with the attack, when we move this up, when we move it up, it takes longer for it to kind of hit, right? So it kind of fades in rather than just being an abrupt transient. So, and you can see that reflected in the waveform, which is kind of game changer, right? Let's do that with this sound, right? So we can shape it even further, right? Of like how hard the transient is hitting, if it's clicking too hard, right? If we want it to just fade in. We have release time. So we can make, snare sounds even more like perk sounds, right? Like really short percussive hits. Right? We can cut some of that noise away with this release slider. And then we have a clipping function. So as I drive this up, we actually get the clipping function on the snare or whatever, pad that we're using it on. So this allows us to kind of get the most out of our sound, right? We can kind of clip it and push it to its maximum capacity, raising that noise floor up on the sound, making it sound fuller. It also adds saturation if you drive it too hard. Be careful with this though, but it is an interesting way to approach drum sound design. I think it's really cool. And then to be able to see what that is in turn doing to the waveform. And then finally you have that frequency slider where we can set the cutoff, right? So this is where I can really have a little bit more control over that upper end. What I've seen, or what I've tended to see from Emergent Drums and some of the generative like options it gives you is a lot of the time it adds like a lot of white noise for some reason, like a lot of that high-end fizz. So having that frequency slider is kind of game changer because you can cut a lot of that out. And then we have a left and right panning switch here. So we can move it in the stereo field. Normally with kick snare, tend to keep them in the middle, right? And then we have the ability to pitch, right? Which is really cool. We have some like performance controls. So like if you were gonna do, drum pads and record your pattern like that, or play more like a performance with these, you can set them to a choke group. Those who use Machine or other drum MPC softwares understand that like when you have a choke group, sounds will cut each other off. So if you have like a sustained note and you have something like a snare that belongs in the same choke group, if it goes off while that sustained note is going off, it's going to cut that note and cut it right off, right? So you can set choke groups, which is really cool. And then so you have two features, so you can build patterns with this, especially in FL Studio. It's really cool because, I can open the piano roll, and when I go inside of the piano roll, then, just get in the range here. But these notes, right, are all corresponding to different pads here, right? As you can see, right, as we set it up. So it makes it really cool where I can build patterns in here, right? Rather than using the sample method where you're dragging the samples into the playlist. So you could use it this way. I don't know. I don't really use it that way. What I like to do is spend time creating the sounds within Emergent Drums. And then from there, I'll drag all of the sounds out into FL Studio and then do a lot of the processing there and the sequencing there, right? So once you end up processing some drums that you really like, right? And the cool thing is we can change all of these at the same time. We can just simply hit that, and that literally generates new samples for every pad here. So as you can see, it's taking a second, but when it does load up, we can also do something that's cool, and it creates a little bit of variety with the samples, right? So like say we find ones that we really like. So say this rim shot sound here. Like what I can do is lock it. So I can come here, right click, go to lock drum pad. I lock that pad. And now when I switch all of these drum pads, that one stays the same, right? So we don't get any change there. And that makes like creating new samples and finding these happy accidents super, super, super satisfying, right? Because we get random samples generated. Oh, I kind of like that one, right? Or that's a cool starting point. So, I can lock this one and I can lock this one and now generate some new samples, right? And once I do that with all of the pads and I create a kit that I really like, then I can go in and start tweaking it and altering the sounds, right? Whether it's the attack, the release, the clipping, or the frequency knob, right? Pitching things differently. I also have the ability to make the sample smaller, right? So let's go here, right? I can make that sample a little bit smaller and hit a little bit differently, right? Or cut the tail of it off if it's too much, right? If there is reverb on it, or like again, if there is that too much of that white noise sound that is generated with Emergent Drums. Another cool feature is once we lock in and we find like, exactly the pattern or the kit that we want to have with our drums, then we can just simply click here, just drag it right into our channel rack, and then we get all of the drums. The only thing that kind of sucks is you got to go back in and name all of them. So just going back and having good naming conventions, right? So just going back, naming all of these exactly what they need to be, right? Whatever the sound is. But I would highly recommend staying organized through this process. But again, it's that simple. And then from there, we can just go about programming like normal, whether that we're playing that in, we're using the piano roll to program those, or we're using, the sequencer. I like using the piano roll because you get a lot more control. And instead of using the piano roll with the emergent drums as a playlist, right? Like using it in the playlist to draw in the pattern, I'd rather use individual channels because you get a lot more control over pitch of the individual drums, right? For instance, if I was going to Emergent Drums and wanting to create a pattern in the piano roll, right? Look at this, where it plays each of the individual sounds. I can't pitch different sounds differently, right? So I can't pitch a hi-hat differently. I can't pitch a roll differently, right? I don't get a lot of control this way. It's cool for like basic patterns, or like if you're trying to just lay something down really quickly. And as you're generating patterns and generating new sounds, working with that, right? But I think then just, pulling them back in as samples and working in the channel rack, you get a lot more control, because here now I can go in the piano roll and I have control over the pitch just of this individual sound. Maybe that kick is a bad example, but right. So we can create interesting rolls and pitch rises, especially with like builds and stuff. So one thing I really wanted to show too is what it's like when you drag your own samples inside of it. So I just really want quickly, I'm going to look up snare, see what pops up. Cool. So we can take our own snare samples or any sample, right, and drag it in. Pull that open a little bit more. Cool. And now we have our own sample in there. Now we could start generating stuff from it, right? So we can go similar to that sound. And that's cool. I added like a little pumping tail to it. So that one's actually pretty cool. Let's generate another sound, right? Let's go back to this sound. And let's generate an even more random sound. It's crazy, right? Now it's like a clap. Cool. And now we have a brand new like clap sound from this sample. This trap snare sample that we dragged in, right? Cool. So we can use like this regenerative synthesis to kind of morph samples and turn them into new interesting recordings. It's just crazy. Just so game changer. But I really recommend going out and trying this. Just seeing for yourself like what its capabilities are. Again, I find myself spending a lot of money on samples already, so it just made sense for me to try this out if I can generate my own samples or take the samples that I've already spent my money on and create even more unique variations of those, right? Just no brainer to me. So I think stuff like this is like the future of AI in music production. I like vetting tools like this because it makes the process a little bit easier. Again, it's not doing so much of the work where you're just putting things in and you're just generating random things and you're just using those as is. I mean, you can use it that way, and that's the beauty of plugins like this. But I think the beauty also is like it appeals to users like me that like full control with sound design, right? So I can alter pitch and attack and release, and I can make things hit a little bit harder, add some saturation, use some different engines to add more of the character, or if I'm going for something more clean, right? I can make more decisions with this tool. I think that is where AI is going to go. And I think as long as it continues to go that direction, I think it's going to be game changer. Just really opens up your mind creatively. So yeah, guys. So go check out this plugin because it's game changer, man. Emergent Drums 2 by Audiolab. Go check it out. That's going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys got a lot out of this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.